Okay, so even if you know how to solve this basic algebra equation right here, it's possible you could be using a ineffective method or a wrong approach to get to the solution. So what am I talking about? Well, of course, I'm going to explain this in the video, but first, let's see if you can solve this basic algebra one-step linear equation. All right, so the problem is 2/3 t is equal to 1/4. And what we're trying to do here is solve for t. Now, this is a multiple choice question, and let's take a look at our answers. So A is 9, B is 12, C is 3/8, and D is 1/3. Okay, so this is the question, and feel free to use a calculator, but really you don't need one here if you know what you're doing. But if you have the answer, go ahead and put that into the comment section. I'll show you the correct answer in just 1 second. Then, of course, I'm going to fully explain how to solve this problem or these type of equations in a more effective manner, and I will highlight a technique or an approach that a lot of students take that is not a good way to solve these type of equations. All right, but before we get started, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is John, and I have been teaching middle and high school math for decades. And if you need help learning math, check out my math help program at tcmathacademy.com. You can find a link to that in the description below. And if this video helps you out, or if you just enjoyed this content, make sure to like and subscribe, as that definitely helps me out. Okay, so here again is our problem. We have 2/3 t is equal to 1/4. We're trying to solve for the variable t. And I did indicate that this is what we call a one-step equation because really it just requires one step to solve. Okay, so let's take a look at the right answer. The correct answer here is C. T is equal to 3/8. All right, now if you got this right, you definitely get a happy face, an A plus, a 100%, and a certificate of excellence for being able to solve a basic one-step linear equation with a fraction coefficient. Matter of fact, you can brag to your friends and family that indeed you are a pro at this, and they'll be like, yeah, I don't understand what you're saying, but it sounds pretty cool. Leave me alone. I'm going to go back to my Netflix. But in all seriousness, if you were able to solve for t, even if you took this method I'm talking about, which is not a good approach, you should still feel very good about yourself. But let's go ahead and get into the problem right now. And first things first, let's suppose you come across this problem on some sort of math quiz or an exam, and you're like, hey, Mr. YouTube Math Man, I forgot all algebra. What should I do? Well, you should guess. And you're like, yes, indeed, that's what I was thinking. I'm going to take a guess. So, yes, you have 1 out of 4 chance here. The worst thing you could do when you're taking a math test, if you still have to take math tests, is to leave questions blank. Just take guess. And you're like, hey, D looks pretty good. Well, that is wrong, but at least you tried, right? So the only time you need to be careful in guessing on exams is if you're going to get penalized for a wrong answer, and that could be the case on some type of exams like the SAT or ACT, but never, ever, ever leave a question blank. But here is another method that you could use if you have some basic knowledge of algebra to figure out the right answer, and that is this. One of these over here is the correct solution. Now we know that C is the right answer. So what we can do is plug in these values, these potential solutions into the equation and see which one works. Now T is the correct answer. Now why is that? Well, let's suppose we're checking these answers and now we check 3/8. So what we're going to have is 2/3 times, we're going to plug in 3/8 as our potential solution right here. And what we're going to be doing is to see if this, when we plug in this 3/8 for t, if this whole thing, when we do the math, is going to be equal to 1/4, because that's what an equation is. The left-hand side equals the right-hand side. So let's go ahead and do that right now, assuming we understand how to multiply fractions. Here you can see we just cross-cancel the 3's, and we have 2/8, and that reduces down to the fraction 1/4. So indeed, 2/3 times 3/8 is equal to 1/4. So there you go. This is the correct solution. So never forget this technique, especially with more advanced equations. Even if you don't know how to solve the equation, as long as you know how to check for check solutions in an equation, which is different than knowing how to solve the equation, you could still figure out the right answer. But that only works if this is a multiple choice question. And if I take all this away, well, you're left with this lovely problem right here, which means we just simply need to do the math. Okay, so as I indicated, this is a one-step linear equation. That means basically this t is to the first power. These are the most basic type of algebra equations. And let's go ahead and just think about some basic algebra equations that you may know how to solve. So what if I have x plus 9 is equal to 10, right? X plus 9 is equal to 10. Seems like a pretty simple problem. So what number plus 9 is equal to 10? Well, hopefully you're saying, hey, Mr. YouTube Math Man, I even know that, and I haven't done algebra since 1956. Well, indeed, x is equal to 1. That is the solution, because 1 plus 9 is equal to 10. But technically, to solve this equation for x, what we want to do is subtract 9. Well, let me just kind of back up here. The objective is to get x on one side of the equation and the number on the other side. Now, this number, hopefully, is the solution if we do all this math right. So we want to get x on one side of the equation and a number on the other. But here we have x plus 9. I want x by itself, right? I got x plus 9. I want x by itself. So how can I get rid of this 9? So some of you might be saying, hey, Mr. YouTube Math Man, just subtract a 9 away from that positive 9. And that is awesome. Indeed, we could do that, but we have a little kind of golden rule of algebra, and that is the following. So equations are very much like, or exactly like a balance scale, okay, or teeter-totter, seesaw, whatever the case you want to think. We have to keep this thing in balance. So if we subtract a 9 over here, as long as we subtract a 9 on the other side, we'll keep the equation in balance. So that is the golden rule of algebra. Whatever you do to one side of the equation, as long as you do the exact same thing to the other side, you'll be a-okay. All right, so we're going to subtract 9 over here because I want x by itself, so I have to subtract 9 on this side of the equation as well. All right, so now we're going to add down in a column manner. So x plus nothing is x. Positive 9 minus 9 is 0. Okay, so this goes away. We don't need to write a 0. No, so now we just have x. Then 10 minus 9 is 1. And there you go. Okay, this is our solution. And of course, we could always plug that in and check. But why did I do this? Well, not to show off my basic linear equation, one-step equation ability. What I want you to do is notice something here. Okay, so here we have x plus 9. Okay, so we have an addition situation in this equation. And to solve this equation, we end up using subtraction. Okay, so let me kind of erase this real quick. So here was the situation, and we have x plus 9 is equal to 10. So to solve this equation, the operation is addition, we ended up using subtraction. Okay, that's kind of what we call an inverse operation. Now, matter of fact, let's kind of switch this around. What about this equation right here? X minus 9 is equal to 10. Well, let's go ahead and solve this equation. So this is minus 9, excuse me. We want x by itself. So how can I get x by itself? Well, we can add 9, okay, to both sides of the equation. And we're going to get x is equal to 19. So it appears that to solve an equation, at least a basic one-step equation, whatever the operation we have, we like to do the opposite on both sides of the equation. And that's pretty much the case, all right? This is called an inverse operation. And let's go ahead and apply that to our situation. So here we have 2/3 t is equal to 1/4. Now, 2/3 t, this means multiplication. Okay, so this is 2/3 times t is equal to 1/4. So before we take on this problem, okay, or actual problem in this video, let's do an easier version. Okay, so let's do an easier version of multiplication situation. Something like this: 2 times t is equal to 8. All right, so 2 times t is equal to 8. Here's 2/3 times t is equal to 1/4. So multiplication, multiplication. So what do we do here? Well, we have multiplication. So remember in the previous examples, we're thinking the opposite operation. So here we have subtraction. Maybe we need to add. If we had addition, we subtract it from both sides. So what happens when we have multiplication? Well, you might be thinking the reverse or the opposite of multiplication or its inverse operation, and that is division. Okay, the opposite of multiplication is division. So you're like, all right, well, maybe we need to divide both sides by something. Maybe it's divide by 2 to solve for t, and that's exactly what we want to do. Okay, so 2t is equal to 8, so we're going to divide both sides of the equation by 2. This is division, this little fraction bar here. So we have a multiplication situation. We're using division to solve, and we get t is equal to 4, which is the correct answer. Okay, so everything seems to be a-okay, at least hopefully most here are saying, yes, Mr. YouTube Math Man, I do understand. Well, now let's apply that kind of logic to our problem. So we have 2/3 t is equal to 1/4. So we can think of this situation as multiplication because that is what it is. So if we're like, all right, if it's multiplication, then we need to use division to solve for t. Okay, so let's go ahead and divide, just like we had 2t here was equal to 8. We divided both sides by 2. So here we can divide both sides of the equation by 2/3 to solve for t. Now we're going to have a bunch of fractions here, but let's do the math anyway. So 2/3 t is equal to 1/4. We're going to divide both sides by 2/3. Nothing wrong here, okay? Everything is going to look pretty good because 2/3 divided by 2/3, anything divided by itself is 1. We have 1t or t. So we're going to have t is equal to, but now we have to figure out this mess right here. We call this a complex fraction. Anytime you have the numerator and denominator, one of which being a fraction or two fractions, in other words, you have a fraction in the numerator, a fraction in the denominator, or a fraction numerator and no fraction in the denominator. Anyways, when you have a lot of fractions going on, this is called a complex fraction. But we have to just think about how to solve this. So this, again, 2/3 divided by 2/3 is 1. That's pretty easy. But this is 1/4 divided by 2/3. So we need to write it this way, 1/4 divided by 2/3. And we want to go ahead and express it this way. So t is going to be equal to 1/4 divided by 2/3. Now we have to remember how to multiply or divide, excuse me, how to divide fractions. So we have to change from division to multiplication by flipping this number on the right. So 2/3 is going to go to 3/2. Now we need to multiply these fractions, which is multiplying the respective numerators and denominators. So 1 times 3 is 3, 4 times 2 is 8, and there is our solution. So t is equal to 3/8. Now that is the correct answer, but unfortunately, that is kind of doing it the long way, excuse me. So most people are like, hey, Mr. YouTube Math Man, that's a lot of work to get, this basic equation solved, and I would agree. Okay, there is a better way. So if you solve the equation in this manner, and a lot of people do because they're thinking, oh, multiplication, I need to divide both sides. When you have a fraction coefficient, there is a much better way to solve these type of equations. Matter of fact, you need to understand the way I'm going to show you, and I'm going to give you a bonus tip as well. So there's like two ways, one kind of primary technique that is much more efficient to solve these type of equations. So let's go take a look at that now. But before we do, I need you to take a look at this, which is an invitation to support this channel, really support my work and efforts to help as many people learn math. Okay, we're teaching for decades. One of the things that really I found was the most beneficial thing for people to really do well in math. Okay, for those people that were struggling in math, when I got these folks to do better, at least got to a point where like, yes, I'm not so bad. This was the biggest thing I was, I think, proud of was helping a person believe in themselves. Whether they use math or algebra, that's kind of irrelevant. Okay, yes, you need to know some basic math skills, but more importantly, what you need to do is believe in yourself. Okay, believe that you can do whatever figure out difficult things or overcome complicated, problems. And if you struggle in math and you just say, well, I'm not smart enough to figure this out, first of all, that's not the case. Okay, you have to figure out a path forward. So a couple of quick suggestions. First of all, change your mindset. Okay, so if you think you can't, there's an old saying, I don't know who said it, I think it's Confucius or someone like that, old philosopher, but it's more like along the lines, if you think you can or you think you can't, okay, if you think you can or if you think you can't, either way, you are correct. In other words, whatever you believe is going to be your end result. Now, I'm telling you, you can do this stuff, but if you're saying to yourself, I really can't learn math. I'm just not that smart. You got to change your mindset. That's the number one reason people struggle in math. The second thing is you need great math instruction. Okay, you got to put in the work, but if you're learning from someone that's you're confused from learning or you don't understand their teaching style, well, it's going to be more difficult to understand the material. If you like my teaching style, check out my full main math courses. You can find links to those in the description of this video. And another thing that you want to be thinking about is how solid are your notes. If you're not taking notes, this is like the number two math problem. So if you can fix your mindset to I can and take great math notes, and assuming you have great math instruction, you absolutely will be successful in math. And I have to get this message across because oftentimes, you'll see videos on how to solve math equations or how to, learn math, this and that, and other thing. Guess what? If you don't have these two things down, you're going to really have a tough time learning mathematics. Okay, so let's get back to this problem. And what we have here now is this equation. Now, nothing really technically wrong on the way we solved it previously, okay? But I don't want you to think of this situation as multiplication. Indeed, it is. We have 2/3 times t is equal to x. But anytime you have a fraction coefficient, okay, this number in front of the variable is called a coefficient. Anytime you have a fraction, it could be like 1/9 x or 2/5 y. Anytime you have this scenario, you want to think in this term. So you don't want to think, oh, multiplication, I need to do division. Nope, don't think in those terms. What you want to do is think in these terms. Think in terms of, oh, I'm going to flip this fraction upside down and multiply both sides of the equation. Because remember, the goal here is to get t by itself on one side of the equation. So there's a much better way to approach this. Matter of fact, let me show you to you right now. Okay, so here is our equation, right? Remember, the goal is to get t by itself. So we have a 2/3 t on the left side. How can we get just a 1t or t by itself? Easy. Okay, so the procedure is just take this number, this fraction, flip it upside down. This works every single time. So 2/3 times 3/2. Now, when you flip a fraction, that's called the reciprocal. So you're going to multiply this fraction by the reciprocal. And what you're going to get, what? You're going to get 3 times 2 is 6 over 6. That is 1, or all this just cross cancels. You're going to get your 1t. So all we need to do is multiply both sides of the equation by the reciprocal. Okay, so flip this upside down and multiply. So you're automatically going to get t on the left. And here we have 1 times 3 is 3, 4 times 2 is 8, and you are done. And we don't have to hassle with complex fractions, okay? So this is the best kind of way to think of these fractions. And again, as I indicated in the beginning of this video, some of you can solve these fractions, but you're doing it in a way that is really, longer, and you're also taking more steps, which increases the risk of you getting the wrong answer. Now, let's take a look at another method that you can kind of think of, and this is perfectly fine. So here we have 2/3 t. So 2/3 t, like so. A lot of students are confused. They're like, hey, Mr. YouTube Math Man, is this the same thing as 2t over 3? And indeed it is, right? 2/3 t is equal to 2t over 3. Okay, so if you see this, it also means this. It doesn't mean this, 2 over 3t. Okay, it doesn't mean this. So the t can be like 2/3 times t over 1. All right, so that t is in the numerator. So you can kind of think of the scenario this way: 2/3 t with the t like here in the center, or 2t over 3. Now, if you think of this as 2t over 3, you have this. 2t over 3 is equal to 1 over 4. Now, what we have is two equal fractions. You have one fraction is equal to another fraction. This is what we call a proportion, and you can use something called the cross product. In other words, you can simply cross multiply to clear these fractions. So we're going to get 4 times 2t. So 4 times 2t is 8t. 8t. Okay, 4 times 2t, again, 8t. 3 times 1, right here, we're cross multiplying is 3. And now we can just solve this basic equation right here for t by dividing both sides of the equation by 8. So t is equal to 3 over 8. So that's another approach to solve this problem. But even if you don't use a proportion or think of this as a proportion, it's just good to know that these are equivalent. Okay, so a simple little lovely basic one-step linear equation like this can get some people in trouble. Again, you don't want to make these problems any longer than they have to because you're going to end up with these complex fractions. And it's just the, kind of a game of chance or a game of probability. The more steps you have to take in a math problem, the more, there is a chance for you to get a wrong answer. Now, to avoid that, you need to be neat and structured and just write steps one at a time and double, triple check your work as you go. Being a little bit paranoid is a good thing when it comes to mathematics. I make errors all the time, and I'm like, I've been doing this for decades. Why? Because in a split fraction of a second, I can get, I can lose my focus. Okay, I'm like, oh, maybe I'm thinking about a text message I got to answer, or whatever the case is. We're only human. Okay, we're not total supercomputers here. So if you lose your focus even for a microsecond, you can end up taking a wrong step. And if you don't catch it, you will make an error. Okay, so with all that being said, I definitely wish you all the best in your math adventures. Thank you for your time and have a great day.